I stood at my son Derek's graveside on a gray November afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. The priest had just finished his final prayer when Rachel approached me. My daughter-in-law's voice cut through the cold air, sharp and emotionless. "Stop crying," she said. "You have 15 days to pack your belongings and vacate the house. My house. The one I built with my own hands 40 years ago." I looked at her face and saw no grief there, only cold calculation. I quietly nodded, turned, and walked to my truck. I drove away, knowing something she did not know yet. The drive to Grove City took 30 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary as I navigated the familiar roads. Aunt Linda's porch light was already on when I pulled into her driveway. She must have seen my headlights coming up the street. The door opened before I could knock. "Come in, Mason," she said softly. I made coffee. I sank into her living room couch, the same couch where Sarah and I had sat countless times over the years. My wife, gone 3 years now to cancer, and now my son, my only child, gone at 38 years old. Linda handed me a mug and sat across from me. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told her about Rachel's cold demand at the cemetery. I told her about the house I built in 1985, back when Derek was just a baby. I'd started my construction business that same year, built it from nothing into something that employed 15 good people. The house sat on 5 acres of land north of Columbus, a main house and a guest house. Sarah and I raised Derek there. Derek had worked in my company for years. Good worker, honest. But something changed about 2 years ago. He grew distant, stopped coming by as much. Rachel had her claws in him by then. They'd married 5 years ago, and at first, things seemed fine. They lived in the guest house initially. Then last year, I offered them the main house. Thought I was being generous, giving them space. I moved into the smaller guest house. Now I see it was the beginning of Rachel's plan. Derek died 2 weeks ago. Heart attack. 38 years old and his heart just stopped. The doctors said it was genetic. The same condition I have, actually. Early stage, they tell me. Take your medication. Watch your stress. Easy to say. Linda listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "What are you going to do?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. The one I'd been carrying in my truck since the funeral. The one I hadn't told Rachel about. 3 days before Derek died, he came to my guest house late at night. Must have been past 11. He looked terrible. Pale. Shaking. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something. Rachel's having an affair." I'd suspected something was wrong in their marriage, but hearing it confirmed hit hard. Derek showed me text messages he'd found on Rachel's phone, messages between her and someone named Brad Sutherland, Derek's old college friend, now a real estate developer. The messages were explicit, romantic, and damning. But worse than that, they discussed money. Our money. The business. The property. Derek told me he'd already contacted a lawyer. He was filing for divorce. Then he handed me this envelope and made me promise something. "Dad, if anything happens to me, open this. I mean anything. Promise me." I promised, but I didn't take it seriously. Derek was young, healthy. What could happen? Linda leaned forward. "What's in the envelope?" I opened it on her coffee table. Inside was a will Derek had drafted 1 week before his death, properly witnessed and notarized. It left everything to me. Every single thing. There was also a detailed letter explaining Rachel's affair, her financial manipulations, and something that made my blood run cold. Proof that Rachel had taken out a life insurance policy on Derek for $500,000 just 6 months ago. But there was more. Documents showing that the house was actually still in my name. I'd never transferred the title to Derek. He'd lived there, but legally, it was mine. Always had been. Linda picked up one of the documents and studied it. "She's going to be very surprised when she finds out." "That's what I'm counting on," I said. "Let her think she won. Let her think I'm just a broken old man who'll walk away quietly. Meanwhile, I'll be building a case." Linda set down her coffee mug. "You need to call Tom Patterson first thing tomorrow." Tom was my lawyer. Old friend. 65 years old and sharp as ever. Specialized in estate law. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was Tom. I stayed at Linda's that night. Couldn't face going back to the guest house. Couldn't face seeing Rachel's face. In the morning, I'd start fighting back. But that night, I let myself grieve. Not just for Derek's death, but for the betrayal. Rachel had fooled us all. Tom Patterson's office smelled like old books and coffee. He'd practiced law in Columbus for 40 years, and his office showed it. Files stacked neatly on shelves, framed degrees on wood-paneled walls, a massive oak desk that had probably been there since the 1970s. He read through Derek's documents with the careful attention I'd expected. His expression darkened as he reached the life insurance policy information. "This is significant, Mason. Very significant." He explained the legal situation. The house was indeed mine. Title had never changed. Derek's will was valid and properly executed. It superseded any claims Rachel might make as his widow. The life insurance policy, combined with evidence of the affair, raised serious questions. But then Tom told me something I hadn't expected. Rachel had already filed her own claim with the probate court. She was claiming Derek owned half the house and a share of my business. She'd moved fast. "She's not wasting time," Tom said. "We need to file Derek's will immediately. And Mason, there's something else you should know. The life insurance company has already flagged this policy as suspicious. Large amount, short time period, young, healthy person. They've been in contact with the police." "The police?" Tom nodded. "They may want to investigate Derek's death more thoroughly. This kind of situation, with the affair and the money and the sudden death, it raises red flags." Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Tom filed all the necessary paperwork with the court. Meanwhile, Rachel was busy making her own moves. She changed the locks on the main house, started selling off Derek's possessions. She even contacted my construction company, telling my employees that changes were coming, claiming she owned Derek's share of the business. Derek had owned 25%, a stake I'd given him when he turned 30. On day 5 after the funeral, I drove to the house to retrieve some of Derek's childhood photos. Sentimental items. A baseball glove I'd given him when he was 7, his high school graduation picture. Things that mattered to me, even if they had no monetary value. Rachel answered the door but didn't open it, just stood there behind the screen. "What do you want?" "Some of Derek's things. Personal items." "I won't be long." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're trespassing. This is my house now. You have no right to be here. Leave, or I'll call the police." I kept my voice calm. "Rachel, I just want a few photographs. That's all." I said leave. I turned to go, keeping my expression neutral. Didn't let her see the anger building inside me. As I walked toward my truck, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out. Tall, mid-40s, expensive suit, perfectly styled hair. Brad Sutherland. I recognized him from the photos Derek had shown me. Brad smirked when he saw me. The old man finally gets the hint. "This is our house now." Rachel appeared at the door, and I saw her smile. A real smile. The kind she'd never shown at Derek's funeral. She and Brad exchanged a look, and something clicked in my mind. They weren't just having an affair. They were in this together, deeper than I'd thought. I drove away, my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from rage, and something else. Determination. That evening, Tom called. "The police want to speak with Rachel tomorrow morning. We filed everything with the court today, including the insurance information. Given Derek's sudden death at 38 with no prior heart issues, they've opened an investigation." "What kind of investigation?" "The kind that asks whether Derek's death was really natural." I sat in silence, processing this. My son? Murdered? The thought had crossed my mind, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real, made it terrifying. Tom continued. The insurance company had already flagged the policy. My filing just added more fuel. "Mason, you leaving quietly was the smartest thing you could do. Let her think she won. Tomorrow changes everything." But even as he said it, I felt my chest tighten. The same tightness I'd been feeling for weeks. The same genetic heart condition that killed Derek. I took my medication and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The next morning, I watched from Aunt Linda's living room window as an unmarked police car pulled up to her house. She'd parked near the main house, within view but not obvious. Two detectives got out. A woman in her 40s, professional suit, badge clipped to her belt. A man, maybe 50, similar attire. They walked up to the main house and knocked. Rachel answered. Even from this distance, I could see her body language change when they showed their badges. She let them inside. Linda brought me coffee. How long do you think they'll be? As long as it takes. They were inside for 2 hours. When they emerged, Rachel stood in the doorway looking shaken. The detectives drove away, and Rachel immediately pulled out her phone, probably calling her lawyer. That afternoon, Tom called with an update. The detectives were Sarah Morrison and James Wright. They'd questioned Rachel about the life insurance policy. She'd acted shocked, claimed it was Derek's idea. Complete lie. According to the insurance application paperwork where Rachel was clearly the one who initiated and signed everything. They also asked about her whereabouts the day Derek died. She claimed she was at yoga class, then shopping. Standard alibi. But they'd be checking it. Tom had more news. The medical examiner was performing additional tests on Derek's body. They were looking for something specific, though Tom didn't know what yet. I spent the next few days going through Derek's computer files. I'd kept his laptop, the one from his desk at the company office. I'd helped Derek set up his first laptop years ago, and he'd never changed the password. Going through his files felt like invading his privacy, but I needed to understand what had happened. What I found broke my heart all over again. Email after email between Derek and Rachel, going back 18 months. The affair with Brad was documented in painful detail. But worse than that were the bank statements. Rachel had been siphoning money from their joint accounts into a private account, under her name only. Over $90,000 transferred in the past year. I found emails between Derek and his lawyer, too. Rachel had been pressuring Derek to get me to sign over the house title. She claimed it was for estate planning purposes. Derek refused multiple times. In one email to his lawyer, Derek wrote, "She keeps bringing it up. Says my dad is getting old and needs to simplify his affairs. But I know what she really wants. She wants to own it outright so she can sell it. I won't do that to my dad. My son had protected me, even when I didn't know I needed protecting." On day 8, I received a letter from Rachel's lawyer, Greg Hammond. I knew the name. Aggressive attorney, known for taking cases other lawyers wouldn't touch. Known for scorched earth tactics. The letter demanded I cease all harassment, drop all legal claims, and vacate the guest house within 7 days. It threatened a lawsuit for defamation and elder abuse allegations. It claimed I'd been mentally unfit and had coerced Derek into signing documents. It threatened a restraining order. Elder abuse. Mentally unfit. The words made me physically sick. The next day, I drove to my construction company office. Or tried to. The locks had been changed. Through the window, I could see Rachel and Brad Sutherland inside, with my company accountant, Helen. Helen looked deeply uncomfortable. I knocked on the window. Helen saw me and looked away, clearly upset. Brad came to the door but didn't open it. "Company's closed for restructuring," he called through the glass. "This is my company. I built it. Derek's share gives Rachel authority to protect the company's interests until the estate is settled. We've frozen the accounts. Irregularities, you understand." Irregularities? There were no irregularities. I'd run that company honestly for 40 years. Brad smiled. "I'm consulting on the restructuring, making sure everything is proper." Rachel appeared behind him. "You should leave, Mason. You're making this harder than it needs to be." My 15 employees were depending on this company for their livelihoods. 2 families with kids in college, 3 single mothers, people who'd worked for me for years. Rachel and Brad were destroying that to get to me. I drove back to Linda's, my hands shaking on the wheel. That evening, Tom called with news that changed everything. Preliminary autopsy results are back. Derek's blood showed unusual levels of digitalis. That's a heart medication. Derek was never prescribed digitalis. Exactly. The police are now treating this as a suspicious death investigation. Rachel is the prime suspect. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. My son had been murdered. Actually murdered, Tom continued. But Mason, the evidence is circumstantial. Rachel has a powerful lawyer. This is going to be a fight. They can't prove she administered it. She'll claim Derek must have taken it accidentally, gotten it from somewhere else. Any number of explanations. What do? We keep building our case, and we prepare for Rachel to fight back even harder. He was right. She did. 2 days later, Rachel filed elder abuse charges against me with Adult Protective Services. The complaint claimed I'd been financially exploiting Derek for years, that I'd forced him to work in dangerous construction conditions, that I was mentally incompetent and dangerous. She provided witnesses, Brad, and 2 of Brad's friends I'd never even met. An APS investigator came to Linda's house. Young woman, maybe 30, professional but clearly just doing her job. She asked me questions about my health, my finances, my relationship with Derek. I answered honestly. Told her about the real situation, about Rachel's affair, the insurance policy, the murder investigation. She listened and took notes. Said she'd have to file a report, but that she'd include all the information I'd provided. She also said I'd need to undergo a psychological evaluation to prove I was mentally competent. Another humiliation, another attack. That same day, Tom called with worse news. Rachel had convinced 3 of our major clients to cancel their contracts. She'd told them the company was unstable, under investigation, unreliable. 40 years of reputation destroyed in a few phone conversations. Worse still, payroll was due in 2 days. The company accounts were frozen. My 15 employees were going to be left without paychecks. People with mortgages, car payments, groceries to buy. I made a decision that night. I withdrew $30,000 from my personal retirement account and paid each employee out of my own pocket. It nearly wiped out my savings. Tom warned me it could look bad in court, like I was dissipating assets. But I couldn't let my people suffer. 3 employees quit anyway. Couldn't afford the uncertainty. Needed stable work. I understood, but it hurt. Meanwhile, I'd hired a private investigator. Carl Hudson, 60 years old, former police detective, thorough and methodical. He'd started digging into Brad Sutherland's background. What Carl found was chilling. Brad had done this before. 7 years ago, his business partner had died suddenly. Heart attack, just like Derek. The partner's widow had suspected foul play, but couldn't prove anything. Brad had inherited the business partnership through their LLC agreement and sold it 6 months later for substantial profit. No charges had ever been filed. The case had gone cold. Carl showed me the file. The similarities were striking. Young, healthy man, sudden heart condition, large life insurance policy, Brad as beneficiary. But the widow had run out of money for lawyers and eventually gave up. We're not giving up, Carl said. This time, we have evidence. We have Derek's documentation. We have the police actively investigating. Brad's not getting away with it twice. But then, things got worse. Day 14. I was at Linda's house when the chest pains started. Sharp, stabbing pain in my left arm and chest. Linda called 911 immediately. The ambulance arrived within minutes. At the hospital, they diagnosed a stress-induced cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but dangerous. The doctor was blunt. Mr. Patterson, your heart condition is genetic and serious. This level of stress is going to kill you. You need to reduce stress immediately, or you'll have a major heart attack. Maybe fatal. How do I reduce stress when someone murdered my son and is trying to steal everything I built? The doctor didn't have an answer for that. While I was in the hospital, Rachel filed an emergency motion for a restraining order. She claimed I'd threatened her. Complete fabrication. But the judge granted a temporary order. I couldn't come within 500 feet of the house or the business. I was effectively locked out of my own life. Linda was furious. She's destroying you, Mason. We have to fight harder. But I was tired. So tired. Lying in that hospital bed, hooked up to monitors, I wondered if it was worth it. Maybe I should just walk away. Take what I could salvage and disappear. Let Rachel win. Then Linda did something that changed everything. She went to the house while I was in the hospital. The restraining order didn't cover her. She told Rachel she needed to retrieve my heart medications from the guest house. Rachel, probably not wanting to look heartless while I was in the hospital, allowed it. Linda got my medications. But she noticed something else. The pool house door was open. Derek and Rachel had a small pool house for storage. Linda, being Linda, decided to investigate. Inside, she found boxes of Derek's belongings. Things Rachel was throwing away. Old clothes, books, random items. And buried in one box, wrapped in a towel, was another laptop, different from the one I'd already searched. This one was older, looked like Derek's personal laptop from college days that he'd kept for sentimental reasons. Linda took it. When she brought it to the hospital, I could barely contain my hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was something on this laptop that could help. Carl Hudson came to the hospital that evening. We need to be careful with this. If there's evidence, we need to maintain chain of custody. But let me look first. He took the laptop and left. I stayed in the hospital overnight for observation. The doctor wanted to make sure my heart was stable. The next morning, Carl returned. His face told me he'd found something. Mason, you need to see this. Carl set up the laptop on the hospital table that swung over my bed. He'd already gotten past the password protection. Derek had used the same password for everything, a combination of his birthday and Sarah's name. Predictable, but it worked in our favor now. Carl opened a folder labeled personal. Inside were journal entries. Word documents dated going back 2 years. Derek had been keeping a private record of everything. I started reading, and my heart broke all over again. The entries from 18 months ago documented the beginning of Rachel's affair. Derek had suspected something was wrong. She was distant, secretive, always on her phone. He'd confronted her, and she'd denied everything. But Derek knew. He wrote about the pain of being lied to by someone he'd loved. Then came entries about money. Rachel pressuring him about the house. Derek wrote, "She keeps saying Dad needs to simplify his assets, that he's getting old and might get confused. But Dad is sharp as ever. She just wants the title in our names so she can sell it without his permission." I see through it now. More entries detailed Rachel's behavior becoming stranger. She'd push him to make changes to insurance policies, to update beneficiaries, to sign documents she claimed were just routine paperwork. Derek refused each time and documented it all. But the most damning entries came from the final weeks of Derek's life, 3 days before he died. Rachel keeps making me herbal tea every evening. Says it's for stress. But I feel worse after drinking it. Heart racing, dizzy. I'm going to stop drinking it and see what happens. 2 days before his death. Didn't drink the tea last night. Rachel was angry. She made a big deal about me needing to take care of my health. Made me feel guilty. Drank it tonight to keep peace. Feeling terrible again. The final entry, the day before Derek died. Something is very wrong. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow, and I need to talk to Dad. I think Rachel is. The entry ended there. Derek died the next morning. I looked at Carl through tears. She poisoned him. She actually poisoned him. Carl nodded grimly. The herbal tea. That's how she administered the digitalis. We need to get this to the police immediately. But there was more. Carl had also been conducting his own investigation into Derek's final day. He'd interviewed coworkers at the construction site. They told him Rachel had come to the office that day, unusual because she rarely visited. She'd brought Derek lunch in a container from home. Derek ate the lunch. Seemed fine at first, then told everyone he felt unwell. He went home early, around 1 in the afternoon. He died at home around 3 that afternoon. Rachel claimed she'd been at her yoga class when it happened. Her alibi. Except Carl had checked with the yoga studio. Rachel had canceled her class that morning. She wasn't there. She'd lied about her whereabouts. This is premeditated murder, Carl said. She planned it carefully. Built up doses in the tea over time, then gave him a final large dose in the lunch. Knew exactly when and how. We gave everything to Detective Morrison. The laptop, the journal entries, Carl's interview notes, the yoga studio records. The case against Rachel was building. But Rachel wasn't done fighting. On day 18, she grew overconfident. Maybe she thought she'd won. Maybe she thought I was too weak to fight back. She and Brad moved openly into the main house together, not even trying to hide their relationship anymore. Then they did something unbelievably stupid. They hosted a party. An actual party, barely 3 weeks after Derek's funeral. Neighbors told Linda about it. Music, laughter, drinking, celebrating their new beginning, apparently. Several neighbors were appalled. One of them, an older gentleman named Arthur, who'd known me for 30 years, called me directly. "Mason, I don't know what's happening over there, but it's not right. Your son just died, and that woman is having a party. Thought you should know." Rachel also started contacting real estate agents about selling the property. She spoke openly about her plans. One agent, Patricia, had worked with me years ago when I'd considered expanding the property. She called Tom Patterson immediately when Rachel approached her. "She wants to list it for $1.2 million, Patricia told Tom. Kept talking about how much money she'd make. Didn't seem sad at all about Derek. It was unsettling. The police got a warrant to search the house and pool house. They executed it on day 19. Rachel wasn't there, was out with Brad somewhere. The search took 4 hours. They found what they were looking for in the garbage bins. A bottle of herbal tea supplements. The label said it was for relaxation and heart health. Testing would later reveal the supplements had been opened and contaminated with ground-up digitalis pills. Rachel's fingerprints were all over the bottle, but her lawyer, Greg Hammond, immediately claimed the evidence was planted, said the bottle was in the garbage. Anyone could have put it there. Still not enough for an arrest, he argued. Detective Morrison disagreed. With Derek's journal entries, the timeline, the fake alibi, the life insurance policy, and the physical evidence, they had enough. But the prosecutor wanted to be absolutely certain before moving forward. Then Rachel made her biggest mistake. She got greedy. On day 20, Greg Hammond filed a massive lawsuit against me. $10 million for defamation. Claimed my accusations had damaged Rachel's reputation, caused her emotional distress, interfered with her inheritance rights. The lawsuit demanded I sign over all claims to the house, business, and estate immediately. Hammond also filed a complaint with the state licensing board, trying to revoke my contractor's license. He claimed my company had safety violations, equipment problems, unpaid taxes. All fabricated, all lies, but each accusation required time and money to defend against. My legal bills had already topped $50,000. My savings were depleted. My health was fragile. I was living in Linda's spare bedroom. 2 more employees had quit. The business was dying. Rachel seemed to be winning. I sat in Linda's living room on day 22, seriously considering giving up. Maybe I'd write a letter to the employees, apologize, and just walk away. Go somewhere quiet. Spend whatever time I had left in peace. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Patterson? This is Jenna Palmer. I don't know if you remember me. I dated Derek in college." I did remember. Jenna and Derek had been together for 3 years before Rachel. They'd been happy, from what I recalled. Then they broke up suddenly in Derek's senior year. He'd never really explained why, and I'd never pushed. "I remember you, Jenna. It's been a long time. I heard about Derek. I'm so sorry. And I heard about the investigation. Mr. Patterson, I have information. Information I should have shared years ago." We met at a coffee shop the next morning. Jenna was 37 now, worked as a nurse, married with 2 kids. She looked nervous. "I need to tell you what happened when Derek and I broke up. It was because of Rachel. She was Derek's friend at the time, just a friend. Or so I thought. She seduced him while we were still together. I found out, and we broke up. I was heartbroken. But I eventually moved on." "I didn't know that," I said. "There's more." Derek and I stayed in touch occasionally over the years. Just friendly emails, nothing romantic. About 6 months ago, Derek called me out of the blue. He sounded frightened, Mr. Patterson. Really frightened. He said Rachel had become obsessed with money and the property. That she'd changed into someone he didn't recognize. He told me he was afraid of what she might do. Afraid of what, exactly? He didn't say specifically. I thought he meant divorce, property fights, that kind of thing. I told him to talk to a lawyer. I dismissed it as marital drama. Now I realize Derek was genuinely afraid for his safety, and I didn't take him seriously. Jenna started crying. "I should have done something. I should have called you or someone. Maybe Derek would still be alive. This isn't your fault, I told her. But I need to ask. Would you be willing to testify? To tell the police what Derek said? She nodded. Yes. I'll do whatever it takes. Derek deserves justice. We had one more piece of the puzzle. Derek had tried to warn people, had tried to protect himself, but Rachel had been too clever, too careful, until now. Detective Morrison called me on day 23. We have enough. We're making arrests tomorrow morning. I didn't sleep that night. Lay awake in Linda's guest room, thinking about Derek, thinking about Sarah, wishing they were both here, wishing none of this had happened. The next morning, Linda and I drove past the house. We didn't stop, just drove by slowly. At exactly 8 o'clock, 2 police cars pulled into the driveway. 4 officers got out. 2 went to the front door. 2 positioned themselves at the back. They knocked. Rachel answered. Even from the street, I could see her face change when they showed the arrest warrant. She tried to close the door. They stopped her. She was handcuffed and led to the police car in her bathrobe and slippers. 30 minutes later, police arrested Brad Sutherland at his office downtown. Both were charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, insurance fraud, and multiple related charges. Rachel made bail the next day. $100,000. Brad's parents paid it. They were wealthy, had money to throw at the problem. Rachel walked out of jail that afternoon with a smug expression, surrounded by lawyers, but she was panicking. I could tell. The walls were closing in, and she knew it. On day 25, she did something desperate. Something that would destroy any remaining sympathy anyone might have had for her. She and Brad broke into my construction company office at night. I'd had security cameras installed after the first lockout, a decision that proved prescient. The cameras caught everything. They destroyed files, smashed computers, poured chemicals on blueprints and project records, stole client lists and contact information. 20 years of business records, ruined. Then, just before leaving, Brad pulled out a lighter. He set fire to the back office. The fire department responded quickly. Neighbors had seen the smoke, but significant damage occurred. The building was still standing but heavily damaged. Insurance would cover the building itself, but the process would take months. My business was effectively dead. The security footage was crystal clear. Rachel and Brad breaking in. Brad starting the fire, both fleeing the scene. The prosecutor added arson and breaking and entering charges. But Rachel wasn't done. She was cornered, desperate, and dangerous. On day 26, she decided if she couldn't have the property, nobody would. She drove to the main house with 2 large gas cans in her trunk. It was mid-afternoon. She thought no one would notice. But Linda had been keeping watch. She'd parked down the street most days, just observing. She saw Rachel arrive, saw her taking the gas cans from the car. Linda called 911, immediately. Then Linda did something incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. She confronted Rachel. I watched the security footage later, from the camera I'd installed on the guest house. Linda walked up to Rachel and said something. Rachel turned, surprised. They argued. Rachel pushed Linda hard. Linda fell, hit the ground badly. Her wrist twisted beneath her at an unnatural angle. Neighbors heard Linda cry out. 2 men ran over. Rachel tried to flee, but they stopped her. One neighbor, a former military man named George, physically restrained Rachel until police arrived. Rachel was arrested again. This time for attempted arson and assault. And this time, the judge denied bail. Rachel would stay in jail until trial. Linda's wrist was broken. They put her in a cast at the emergency room. She was shaken, but okay otherwise. More angry than hurt. I should have been faster, she told me. Should have stopped her sooner. You probably saved the house, I told her. You're a hero. Then came the final piece that sealed Rachel's fate. Brad Sutherland, facing serious prison time, decided to save himself. He made a deal with the prosecutor. Full cooperation. In exchange for a reduced sentence. Brad told them everything. He and Rachel had planned Derek's murder together for months. Brad had provided the digitalis, stolen from his elderly mother's medicine cabinet. Rachel had administered it in the herbal tea over a 2-week period, gradually building up the dose. Then she'd given Derek a final large dose in his lunch the day he died. They'd planned to wait a respectable mourning period, maybe 6 months, then get married. They'd sell the property and the business, split the money, and start over somewhere else. Brad thought Mason would be easy to push aside. An old man, grieving and alone. They'd bully him or buy him out cheaply. But Brad hadn't known about Derek's will, hadn't known about the documentation, hadn't known Mason would fight back. Now Brad was testifying against Rachel to save himself. His testimony was detailed, specific, and devastating. The preliminary hearing was on day 28. I sat in the courtroom gallery with Linda, her arm in a sling, my heart patched together with medication and determination. The prosecutor presented the evidence. Derek's journal entries, read aloud in court. The digitalis laced tea. The fake alibi. The life insurance policy. The affair. Brad's testimony. The security footage of the arson and assault. All of it, piece by piece, building an overwhelming case. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue temporary insanity, tried to claim Rachel had been mentally unwell, not responsible for her actions, but the premeditation was too clear, the planning too detailed, the greed too obvious. When Rachel took the stand, she maintained her innocence, claimed she'd loved Derek, claimed everything was either a misunderstanding or planted evidence. Then the prosecutor asked about the party she'd hosted, about moving Brad in immediately after Derek's death, about trying to sell the property while Derek's body was barely cold. Rachel's composure cracked. She grew angry, defensive, started blaming me, started saying Derek had complained about me for years, that Derek had wanted to be free of my control. The prosecutor pulled out Derek's journal entries. Read the passages where Derek defended me, where Derek wrote about protecting me from Rachel. Rachel's face turned red. She screamed at the prosecutor. "This was supposed to be mine! Derek promised me. We were supposed to have everything." The courtroom went silent. Even her lawyer looked shocked. Rachel had just admitted, in open court, that she'd expected to inherit everything, that she'd had plans for the property and money, plans that required Derek to be dead. The judge denied bail. Rachel would remain in custody pending trial. The preliminary hearing had been a disaster for her defense. Then came my turn to take the stand. The prosecutor asked me to read something. Derek's final letter, the one from the manila envelope. The letter Derek had written knowing something might happen to him. My hands shook as I read Derek's words aloud. "Dad, if you're reading this, something happened to me. I need you to know, you were the best father I could have asked for. I'm sorry I let Rachel drive a wedge between us these last 2 years. She wanted me to get you to sign over everything, and when I refused, she became a different person. I see that now. I love you, Dad. Take care of my memory. And please don't let her win. You taught me that integrity matters more than money. I should have listened better. Make sure the truth comes out. Love, Derek." People in the courtroom were crying. The judge wiped his eyes. Even the bailiff looked emotional. I looked at Rachel. She stared back at me with pure hatred. No remorse, no guilt, just rage that her plan had failed. That night, I finally let myself grieve properly. Not just for Derek's death, but for everything. For the son I'd lost. For the betrayal. For the innocence destroyed. Linda sat with me, her good arm around my shoulders, and we cried together. Justice was coming. Slowly, painfully, but coming. 3 months passed between the preliminary hearing and the trial. Rachel remained in jail, unable to make bail. Her lawyer tried multiple times to get her released, but each attempt failed. The evidence was too strong. The flight risk too high. Brad Sutherland's trial came first. With his cooperation and guilty plea, he was sentenced to 15 years for conspiracy to commit murder and accessory after the fact. 15 years. It seemed like both too much and not enough. He'd helped plan my son's murder, but his testimony would help convict Rachel. Rachel's trial lasted 2 weeks. I attended every day. Sat in the same seat in the gallery, Linda beside me, and watched as the prosecutor methodically destroyed every aspect of Rachel's defense. The evidence was overwhelming. Derek's journal entries, the digitalis in the herbal tea, the life insurance policy, the affair documented in text messages, Brad's testimony about their plan, the fake alibi. the attempted arson, the assault on Linda. All of it presented clearly, professionally, devastatingly. Rachel's lawyer tried everything. Claimed police had planted evidence. Claimed Brad was lying to save himself. Claimed Derek had been suicidal and taken the digitalis himself. Claimed the journal entries were fabricated. None of it worked. The jury saw through every desperate attempt. Jenna Palmer testified. She told the court about Derek's phone call 6 months before his death, about how frightened Derek had sounded, about the warning signs she'd missed. My employees testified. They described Rachel bringing lunch to Derek that final day, described how Derek had seemed fine before eating it, then suddenly ill afterward. The yoga studio owner testified. Confirmed Rachel had canceled her class the morning Derek died. Confirmed Rachel had lied about her alibi. Detective Morrison walked the jury through the timeline. Showed how carefully Rachel had planned everything. How she'd built up doses of digitalis over weeks. How she'd timed the final dose for a day when she had a weak alibi. How she'd expected to get away with it. The prosecutor's closing argument was powerful. He held up a photograph of Derek, young and smiling. This was a man who loved his father, who worked hard, who had his whole life ahead of him. Rachel Patterson ended that life for money, for a house, for property. She poisoned him slowly, methodically, and when he started to suspect something was wrong, she gave him a final dose that stopped his heart. She watched him die. Then she tried to steal everything he'd left behind. She tried to destroy the father Derek loved. She showed no remorse, no humanity, no conscience. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, every count was guilty. First-degree murder, conspiracy, fraud, attempted murder of Linda, arson, all guilty. Rachel showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Just sat there, stone-faced, as her lawyer hung his head. The sentencing hearing was 2 weeks later. The judge reviewed everything, spoke about the deliberate nature of the crime, the betrayal of trust, the greed and callousness. Rachel Patterson, you have been convicted of murdering your husband in cold blood for financial gain. You showed no mercy to Derek. You showed no remorse afterward. You attempted to destroy his father and steal everything Derek's family had built. You are a danger to society and deserve the maximum penalty under law. Life in prison, without possibility of parole, for 35 years. Rachel would be 70 years old before she could even apply for parole. Effectively, a life sentence. She screamed when the sentence was announced, had to be restrained by bailiffs, yelled about injustice, about being framed, about how it wasn't fair. But her words were empty. Everyone knew the truth. All of Rachel's legal claims were dismissed. The court awarded me full ownership of all property in Derek's estate, exactly as Derek's will had specified. The life insurance company denied Rachel's claim and awarded the death benefit to me as the alternate beneficiary Derek had listed. I used that money, $500,000, to do something meaningful, something Derek would have wanted. I couldn't live in the main house anymore. Too many memories, too much pain. Instead, I converted it into Derek's workshop, a nonprofit training center teaching construction skills to young people who needed a chance. Kids from difficult backgrounds, kids who needed direction and purpose. I hired all my remaining employees as instructors. They taught carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, project management, real skills that led to real jobs. The first class had 10 students. 5 of them found employment within 3 months. The program worked. Aunt Linda moved into the main house to help run the nonprofit. She managed the administrative side while I oversaw the training. Her broken wrist healed, though it ached in cold weather. I moved back into the guest house. Small, quiet, manageable. Close enough to be involved with the workshop, but far enough to have peace. My health improved with the stress reduced. The doctor was pleased with my progress. I took my medications religiously, exercised gently, ate better, tried to take care of myself. Derek would have wanted that. Jenna Palmer visited me one afternoon, 6 months after the trial. She brought flowers for Derek's grave. We drove to the cemetery together, stood at his headstone, talked about the Derek we'd both known and loved. The real Derek, not the Derek that Rachel had tried to paint as weak or controlled. Jenna and I became friends after that. Not romantic, just two people who'd loved the same good man and wanted to remember him properly. I found a box of Derek's childhood belongings while cleaning out the main house. Inside were letters Derek had written over the years but never sent. Letters to me, to Sarah, to friends, private thoughts he'd kept to himself. One letter, dated 2 years ago, when Rachel was pressuring him hardest, said, "Dad, I know I've been distant. I'm ashamed of how I've let Rachel treat you. You built everything with your own hands, and she wants to take it. I won't let that happen. I promise. I'm going to make this right. I just need to figure out how to get out of this marriage first. I love you. I hope I can make you proud again." Reading that letter, I realized Derek had been protecting me all along. The will, the documentation, the envelope, all of it was Derek's way of making sure I'd be safe. Even knowing he was in danger, he'd thought of me first. The community response was overwhelming. When word spread about Derek's workshop, donations poured in. Local businesses contributed tools and materials. Volunteers offered their time. The program expanded from 10 students to 30 within the first year. A local newspaper ran a feature story about the case and the workshop, how justice had been served, and how Derek's memory was being honored. The article brought even more support. On the 1-year anniversary of Derek's death, I stood at his grave on another gray November day. But this time, I wasn't alone. 30 students from the workshop came with me. 15 employees. Linda, Jenna, friends and neighbors. We planted an oak tree beside Derek's headstone. Derek had loved oak trees as a child. Sturdy, strong, long-lasting. Like the values I'd tried to teach him. I spoke to the gathered crowd. Told them about Derek's legacy. About how he'd trusted me to fight for truth. About how integrity mattered more than money. About how love could triumph over hate if we had courage. Then we held a ribbon-cutting ceremony at the workshop, an expansion we'd built with the insurance money and donations. New classrooms, better equipment, space for 50 students. I stood at the entrance with oversized scissors, Linda beside me, and cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded. Students cheered. It was a moment of pure joy in the midst of grief. Inside, we'd mounted Derek's old hammer on the wall. The first hammer I'd given him when he was 10 years old. Beside it, a plaque. Derek Patterson, builder of more than he knew. I touched the hammer and felt Derek's presence. Felt his approval. Felt the peace I'd been searching for. That evening, I sat on the guest house porch and watched the sun set over the property. 5 acres of land that represented 40 years of work. Represented family. Represented everything good I'd tried to build. Rachel had tried to take it all. Had murdered my son for it. Had nearly destroyed me. But she'd failed. Because Derek had been smarter than she'd realized. Because I'd fought back. Because truth, eventually, wins over lies. I learned something through all of this. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. About taking something broken and building it into something meaningful. Rachel took my son's life, but she couldn't take his legacy. Derek trusted me to finish what he'd started, and I did. Not with anger or revenge, but with persistence and faith in justice. Not by destroying Rachel, but by building something good from tragedy. Derek's workshop would help hundreds of young people over the years. Would give them skills, purpose, opportunities. Would be Derek's real inheritance. My son had built things with his hands. Now we built futures with his memory. That's how love defeats hate. That's how truth defeats lies. And that's how a good man's legacy lives on. I'd like to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for justice when everything seemed lost? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had betrayed you? How did you find the strength to keep going? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences might help someone else who's facing their own battle. If this story touched you, please give it a like. Subscribe to hear more stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. Share this with someone who needs to hear that truth and persistence matter, that justice is possible, that even in our darkest moments, we can find the strength to fight back. Thank you for listening to Derek's story. Thank you for caring about truth and justice. And remember, The legacy we leave isn't measured in property or money. It's measured in the lives we touch and the good we create from our pain. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and never give up on what's right.